Hey there, thanks for joining us at the Rabbit Hole of Research, where you'll learn a few facts that you can impress your friends with at a party. In studio, the basement studio today.
Hello.
It's me, Joe, joined by...
It's Nick.
And here we are. We got some new equipment. Every episode, it seems like we're testing something new. We tested our, can we dial in a caller? Nick was in his home studio. I was here in the basement studio. We had a guest come on. So we're trying everything. The first 5 episodes, episode 5 is kind of big. So we'll get some boom arms and kind of fans to join up.
All right, Joe, let's be honest on why we got the boom arms.
Well, yeah,
Chris and I were very leaning back too much for Joe.
Yeah.
We had to get something to make it easier.
Yeah, we couldn't afford a sound engineer to yell at us. So, I take a little blame. I should have been yelling at him like, hey, get closer to the mic, But, here we are now. We got this little setup, kind of make it feels like you need to be there and engaged with everything. So, yeah, so we had last episode, Nick, he kind of chose this week's again. We had,
today we're going to be covering mutants.
Talking mutants, all about mutants.
Different types on how it runs in pop culture and seeing where the science is actually going with it.
Yeah, no, I'm a huge X-Men fan. I should be honest. I'm more just a huge Wolverine fan. I don't even, the other X-Men are there. But Wolverine was it for me, getting into comic, kind of growing up, wanting to be a scientist, which I became. Wolverine was like, oh, this guy is this cool. I don't know why. Just a cool character that I love.
Seeing how the mutants have been in the X-Men and all of Marvel, they have such a wide range of different powers and different abilities that it's so cool to see like anyone can be a mutant in this universe. And I think that's the big draw of them. Like you could pretty much put anybody in a role for Xavier's school or the Brotherhood and feel like you're part of them. And I think that's a major thing that helps them go.
Yeah, no, and I think it had, the history of that when it came out, it was very an allegory to the civil rights movement, and you had the mutants, which were different than the humans, and you had that separation. So exploring there through comics, exploring that, they give a place and kind of a sense of place when you're in the comic world that wasn't always there. And through these mutants, you could see, you could be different, both super ordinary different, but you also then, as you dug in, there was mutants who were just, they had lame
visual
kind of powers, right? They didn't have kind of the fantastical powers. They were, more.
I think Max Bemis wrote for Marvel, and I think it was the lamest X-Men, and this kid had the superpower of being able to explode once. That was his
not
power.
Very helpful. That's not very good.
That was the whole arc, and it was just about being a super lame, right. Oh, you're a mutant, you're different. But no one would know. But I think his parents ended up sending him away to the school, and he was the one that got made fun of for it. It was. Oh man, that was.
Yeah. I can.
We'll have to put in the show notes on what the name of that was.
The show notes. Here goes Nick now.
Yeah. What? Why can't I put things in the show notes?
You're welcome. Very welcome to put stuff in the show notes. And folks listening, hopefully some of you guys will go ahead and write into us and kind of the notes and the comments, and we can address things on future episodes as we roll these out and catch up with them. But yeah, we're excited. But we always talk about, we got one beverage. Nick and I were coming off of I'm coming off a dry January. I can't speak for Nick. I don't know if he was participating in dry January, but I'm having the Insufficient Clearance Hazy IPA by Sketchbook. I just discovered them up in Evanston, so really good. And Nick, I think
I think I'm having the Insufficient Clearance.
Look at that.
By Sketchbook.
Copy.
Yeah.
But, getting back to the mutants, I think it's an interesting point. We're talking about the fantastical powers with these kind of not so much. But this might be an interesting time to talk about genotype versus phenotype.
Oh, yes. Joe, what does that all mean?
What does it all mean? Here we go. Got to put my glasses on. No, so basically speaking, the genotype is the code of our DNA, right? So our genes, let's think of it that way. It's what our genes say. The sequence of the base pairs, A, T, C, G, they go together. It's kind of like the instructions for your cells and how they go together, your body plan, an organism's body plan. That's the instructions. That's what's coded. And then the phenotype is actually what you observe. And so that's what we see. That's the appearance of the thing or what's presented. So, you know, you have this issue where things can be in your genotype that aren't expressed and shown in your phenotype. And so you could be a mutant right now, right? And that's, you know, that's somewhat how evolution works, right? Because evolution really, you could, if you had a mutation in your genome, right? So you get mutations, and we can go down that rabbit hole, how that happens, but you get mutations, you know, and so your genotype changes, but your phenotype isn't put to the test until maybe your environment changes, right? So one classic example is your environment changes, and all of a sudden a part of the population is very well suited for that kind of gene to take place for that product, and all of a sudden you become advantageous amongst the population. So you have these kind of small adaptive changes that kind of then add up and add up and add up, and you get some big evolutionary kind of movement. So you really have this kind of...
It's all about, like, your environment, too. Like, what is it? The African elephant that their tusks started getting smaller, right?
I mean, maybe. I don't... Yeah. I'm not as familiar
because
with...
they started being poached so much.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah.
They started...
Potentially, right. So then they were...
breeded.
Right. That's right. So the ones with smaller tusks would live and reproduce and pass their genes along, which coded for smaller, right?
Which would be a mutation at that point,
I have to
right?
look that up. Did you notice for a fact, or you just kind of...
I'm like 90% sure.
All right, yeah, we'll have to put that definitely in the show notes. But that's exactly...
We'll cut that out if it's wrong.
That was the moths in England during the start of the Industrial Revolution, right? So you had white and the black moths, and so all the buildings were white, lightly colored. So the black moths would, get eaten by birds, and so their population numbers were small. But then when soot came from the Industrial Revolution, classic example, then the white moths stood out, and their numbers went down because now the birds would see them and eat them, whereas the black grayish moths would kind of hide in the soot. So you have these examples like that where once again your environment puts pressure, and your genotype, which isn't always expressed. In this case, they're both expressed. So I'm thinking about the mutants. Kind of get back to the world there, where a number of times their powers aren't necessarily expressed until they're put under pressure or something triggers, they get a certain age, and then all of a sudden they manifest these powers. But you could have a lot of people in that world who are mutants and just don't know it yet. I mean, you could have that where they haven't been put under some pressure to actually express that mutation, so to their fullest power. The phenotype hasn't been revealed. So
I feel like a lot of them also have like very centered on their environment powers, like Dust, which I think she came from a place in the Middle East, and her power is to turn into like sand and be able to blow around. And
right. It's
a lot of that's really cool to see how people are adapting in their universe.
Right.
And it's like, it's I don't know, what would you call that? Like, would it be an environmental mutation? Is that a thing?
Yeah, right. I mean, your mutations can occur a number of ways that you can have it. I mean, you can have just natural mutations caused by UV radiation can cause mutations. So you can have these things in there, and so the environment toxins, that are in your environment, they can cause these issues.
Wait. Are you telling me that the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are possible?
I'm not.
This is sounding like.
I was going to go back that we have how mutations occur, and then you also got to think there's mutations that occur. So you can think of your humans. Kind of, let's start there, like skin cancers. I mean, those are mutations, right? So that your cell cancers are uncontrolled cellular growth, and so a mutation happened in replication checkpoints, and so you get this uncontrolled growth. But that doesn't necessarily pass on through your lineage, right? So really you got to have mutations in your reproductive cells, so sperm, the egg, and those is where then those mutations are then passed on, right? So you got to have specific mutations in specific areas, and that's where you look at things, and these are kind of changes that happen there. I actually have a question right there. So you said that cancer wouldn't be transferred down through relatives, right? Or is that not a thing? Yeah, so you can be predisposed to having issues, right? So that can be passed down. But if you had skin cancer, it doesn't necessarily mean your kids will have skin cancer, right? So if you tanned out in the sun all the time and laid out and your kid doesn't, they necessarily wouldn't have skin cancer. You have other forms of cancer, right? You might just be more predisposed to cancer.
Okay. Yeah.
And then they could develop, they smoke and then they get cancer. But you have people who smoke tons and never get any cancer. You get people that, just smell a cigarette and hadn't smoked and they can get cancer. So there is some environmental factors. I mean, it's a complex thing. using hormones. I mean, that's why there's not a cure to cancer, right? Quite yet. So as you look for things like that, but we're veering into this kind of more science. I kind of want to get back to which is good. I'm always happy to talk about it, but I think also that the fantastical stuff is like, can you get to some of these mutations? Like, could you do it and have a superpower like that? And some just don't make sense.
So would the Incredible Hulk be considered a mutation?
Yes, I would say yes, because that was a gamma radiation.
Yes.
Altered his genome. And actually, not only that, but if you follow the comics, he had Hulk children, right? So that means that it was not only, which makes sense, right? That it would affect only him, but also his, kind of his reproductive
offspring,
machinery and kind of the coding there, that it just kind of wasn't just a topical thing where he had it and then it stopped. But no, he could pass on those traits for Incredible Hulkness. I guess that's the
Incredible Hulkness.
Yeah. So
the amount of media that has mutations in it, but you don't really think about it. Yeah. Like there's a whole game, the Fallout series. All the creatures in there pretty much have mutations of things that we know of now. They have cockroaches that are now rad bugs, which are giant cockroaches. It's like, throughout the years, these things have been exposed to radiation that have mutated into something huge.
This was last episode, right? Giant animals. We're getting back there.
Oh yeah, we've also touched on X-Men already. I'm wondering how many episodes we can touch on X-Men.
That's right. No, it's.
Before someone's like
a lot of
cease and desist.
a lot of hand wavium in there, right? Because you go and you think about some of the characters. I brought up Wolverine, and this is interesting. Like, could you because there's two parts to Wolverine. One part was his healing factor, that he can heal incredibly quick from wounds or cuts or anything. I mean, he's almost indestructible and immortal, right? And
even diseases.
Even diseases. That's right. No, there was several lines where he was injected with things that then would cure. I think the one that they had figured out some virus to change mutant, take their mutant powers, like make them repair the mutations in their genome to come back, so genetic engineer them on the fly with recombinant viruses. And so they injected Wolverine, he made antibodies to it, and then they used that to cure everyone. And that was an animated series. I don't know if they had a track like that in the comic also, but I remember in the 90s that was one. That was a couple episode line, yeah.
Because the 90s.
Yep.
They had a lot of good stuff from the actual comics, but they condensed it down and made it bite-sizable.
That's good. You didn't have to read back then. You just wake up on Saturday, have your Captain Crunch, and watch X-Men. Yeah, so you think about it, but he had the two parts. One was the healing factor, but the other one was the metal fusing into. And I looked that up because I was really curious, just thinking about metal binding and what that works, right? Because we have calcium, which is a metal, a soft metal, but that's part of our bone structure, collagen, calcium. Some other trace metals kind of all form in there. So then it was like, well, can you replace the calcium with other metals? And it's just fascinating. So one was the titanium. A titanium will make some fusion with bone. You think dental implants or surgical implants or screws into bone, that you will get kind of this fusion there. But if you think it out too far, you keep going with it and going, well, can you coat bones? Can you do things like that? Bones are a living kind of part of your body. I mean, they kind of go, nutrients are exchanged, your bone marrow is where your red blood cells are formed. So if you coat the bones with metal, now all of a sudden you kind of stop this living bit of yourself from actually functioning. The calcium in your bones and things like that, that's a sink of this mineral, right? Calcium is an important mineral for your body. It's used in a lot of other cellular functions. So this is a sink of a metal that you need. So if you start replacing it and removing it, then you begin to now downstream affect the rest of your bodily functions. So somewhat the Wolverine character, and it kind of was explored after he had his adamantium pulled back out, that his healing factor was greatly improved. And so kind of the whole thing you forget about, and it's not explored enough, I think, is that his healing factor is what's keeping him from probably dying of having the metal fused and
I never
embedded
actually thought
into
of
his bones, right? So if you kind of take that approach, that why can't we do it to regular people? Well, no, you can. And that's when they failed a bunch of times. It was kind of a slick thing where they tried other folks, and I guess Sabretooth and Wolverine had the healing factor. And it was just by accident that they had used Wolverine, and it worked. But that was probably because you probably shouldn't coat bones with metal.
Yeah, it's just in general not a great idea.
Right.
Like,
but really the thing about it wasn't his mutation isn't the metal. His mutation was the healing factor.
Yeah.
But he's known for the adamantium claws. and kind of, which is a fake metal also, right? So it had
Wait, but vibranium is real, correct?
Yeah, all fake.
Joe,
just like kryptonite. No, that don't exist. No, none of those. They're all.
Joe, I don't know what you're talking about, man. You're really breaking my heart here.
Richard Pryor made fake kryptonite, right? With like nicotine and. I'm trying to remember. That's Superman 3, right? Yeah, 3 was that one. 4 was the sun guy. I can't. Yeah, look, yeah, Superman. We got to give DC some love too, right? So
I mean,
he wasn't a mutant. He was from a different. Superman was just from a different planet. I don't know. Actually, I wasn't a big DC person. So maybe we'll have to have a DC fan on the show. If you're a DC fan, hit us up. We'll get you on. But yeah, I don't know the lore as well as I do Marvel.
Of who?
So it's DC. I don't know.
Oh, in general, man.
Like mutants. I mean, their big characters weren't mutants, like Batman, Superman, the Flash.
The Flash would be considered mutant.
Yeah, okay, yeah, right. He would be. Yes. He did have the speed.
Jeez, I'm really drawing blank on some.
I know. Yeah. See, Green Lantern.
Who's in DC? Well, he's got a ring.
Right, he's got the ring on. Shazam. I'm just thinking of the popular ones. He was also not a mutant.
Cyborg was a cyborg.
Right. Well, yeah, that's in the name.
Well, but I mean, would that be like it's a forced mutation? Then,
I don't know
right?
if it was mutated though, right? I mean, that's like if you have
would that be considered a mutation, like having these extensions?
I would go modification. Body modification would be more it. I think a mutation has to be. I'm gonna define it as you have to alter the genome, which then presents as a phenotype. So that a specific phenotype from a genetic mutation. And that would be the mutant definition I would give in this case. So a cyborg, it would be out. Unless you go, well, you need it genetically modified so that it accepts the cyborg, kind of components, or there was something in that type of effect. But I think that would be where I would,
I feel like that one's a little bit longer of a stretch. When it comes to stuff like that, but like, I'm going to touch back on King Kong. Yeah. He kind of is a mutant as well.
So
like compared to like a regular gorilla.
Well, right. If they're the same lineage, right? As we talked about that, Kong could be part of his own species. Like dinosaurs were big, right? They weren't like there was the mutant of little dinosaurs, and they were naturally giant animals. If we think of it that way, and they were kind of there, but that would be, so they weren't necessarily mutants so King Kong was King Kong. Like King Kong, there were King Kongs with wings, then they might be mutants, or you know what I mean? Like you gotta separate it just because you're taller, bigger.
Godzilla, he was what's?
Yeah, I don't know.
Man, yeah. Godzilla, I feel like has a little bit of a blind spot for me.
Yeah. I mean, I'm familiar, but I'm not. Like, it's kind of one of those things. You go down the Godzilla rabbit hole. There were so many iterations of it, but I don't think any of them. Well, you did have the one where it was like he was supposed to be a modified space creature, right? That was sent to Earth. That was the one. That was Godzilla versus like Megalodon or something like that.
Yeah,
that one.
I actually had that on TV the other day.
Yeah, right. I'm trying to think because he had that. Yeah. Because he was like supposed to be a natural creature, but then you rope around, you get to Godzilla. I think one of the things we're kind of touching on the human aspect, but I always think back to the movie Gattaca and the ramifications of genetic modification and things like that and heading and that. If you're not familiar with Gattaca, great movie, check it out. And the whole idea was that there was genetic engineering had come to a point where you could edit out kind of defects or what was seen as human defects to give kind of more perfect humans. And then once that happened, natural humans were kind of segregated from, humans who were genetically perfect or quote unquote genetically perfect. So they had no superpowers. They weren't powered in any way, but there still was a segregation between, the haves and the have-nots. And the movie follows the two brothers. One was born natural, and then the younger brother been genetically modified and was kind of given all the gifts of life and had a really great career. The other brother was like kind of cleaning, floors, but then he kind of tricked the system to prove that even though he was natural, he could still achieve as well as the folks who were modified. So I think it's a really good commentary on what a mutant, right? Because the brother would technically be a mutant if you're not natural, right?
Yeah, like it would be like having that level of like modification on the body, like right. It wasn't a natural way of doing it, and it's like.
I guess then you got to define natural, right? I mean,
exactly.
You're going because that could become natural, right? That's a Brave New World, right? You have. I mean, once again, that this storyline's been
to change up where it's now like, all right, is this a new thing that's happening for everyone, or is it still like a one-off shot? Like,
Right. Yeah.
where how often have we actually seen that in human civilization? Like,
Well, humans, I don't. Right, because yeah, right. It
Like-
gets weird, but I mean, there are. Once again, you go down a tricky line of defining what genetically normal and what's genetically abnormal, because there is a bell curve probably of genetics there, and you have to be. Yeah, I feel tread lightly there, because the things that are you can go down the wrong rabbit hole here, I think, and miss the point a little bit. I mean, I think that's why staying in the fantastical and a hand wavium is fun, because it keeps you away from some of the social commentary that folks can get into. But
love
you
seeing like
you know what I mean? I mean, it's
seeing how that aspect of works around our reality is
right.
like, how does it actually work? Like, that is the one part of this topic that I'm like, since none of the listeners can see my eyes when Joe's talking, I've been like wide-eyed, like, oh wow.
Yeah, a lot of it. I mean, but a lot of it's all speculation, right? Because I think moving in that direction, and you're starting to see it now. So they just had a couple weeks ago, there's kids who were born genetically deaf. They have a mutation in some of the proteins that form on the hair cells inside the ear. So hair cells actually vibrate, and that's what kind of translates sound in our ear. As you get older, your hair cells kind of degrade, and they don't regenerate. And so what they did was they kind of used kind of genetic engineering tools to put that gene back in to these kids' ears, and the cells, particular cells, to express the protein that was missing, that had been missing or deformed or kind of abnormal, that as it started expressing, I think they said 5 out of the 6 kids all recovered their hearing in a significant way. So you're already starting to see it, and then that gives evidence that can you use this for other genetic disorders, right? So in some ways, in a weird, twisted way to think about it, if you have a genetic you have an abnormal gene that causes a phenotype of no hearing, you're technically the mutant, and then we're fixing the mutants.
Yeah,
right. That's kind of
that is a
when you
wild
think about
way
it,
of
right?
looking
Because per our definition, that you have a genotype that's been altered, and then you get a phenotype that's realized, then you are now, that deviates from normal, and we can define normal in all the ways, then you are a mutant, and we fix the mutants now, right?
So they're going the striker route right away.
That's right, yeah, we're here, that's right. And that's what Gattaca's, right? Gattaca's fixing the natural mutants to make them more perfect, in Brave New World, and then you stratify society that way based on people who are mutated heavily versus those who are not mutated and follow some norm. You say heart disease and things like that. So things that are good, and you go, you now can fix, maybe proteins that cause clogging or things like that we're finding out in a cellular process. You could then run that out and go, look at that. We can fix these things now through genetic engineering, kind of. And that's, it's kind of scary, but also fascinating, and wow.
I absolutely love researching this. This is such a fun one to be like, seeing all the ways that science is trying to take different routes to achieve something that is like, absolutely love it, because it almost seems like science fiction half the time, where it's like,
you're hitting there. Yeah, that's the
we're
stories.
touching on those territories so often, and it's like, what with the AI, half the things that we talked about were science fiction.
Right. No, this just 5 years ago, 10 years ago now. We're speeding ahead, and you start to cross those borders and those barriers. And the more you understand, right, as you start to understand, and this gets into that social bit, because who are you actually studying? How are you studying? What populations? And so you have this whole thing, because there are populations you're studying that might not be genetic, and so you never study those folks because they get tossed out of the studies, and you go, but their conditions might be something else, a different gene or a different factor that's kind of affecting them. So you have the same once again, you have the same phenotype. Then you can't hear. Let's use that example, since you can't hear. But then so one could be genetic, or it could be gene X. The other one could be gene Y. And so how do you study? And if one population is affected more by gene Y, and you only study gene X in this population, you start then to have these disparities between the use of the technology. And that's kind of going to be interesting moving forward. And you kind of see that in some of the non-genetic, but the Alzheimer's treatment, where, the drugs that they've come out with they're mostly tested in populations that were white, predominantly white, and populations, people of color, they weren't tested because they didn't have amyloid buildups that allowed them to cross the test threshold to be a test subject. And that's because some of the factors that are causing memory loss in people of color are due to, vascular kind of dementia, which is caused by diabetes and things like that, which is more prevalent in that community than in other communities. So you have these really interesting kind of dynamics happening. And as technology goes forward, folks have to be vigilant, but also they have to be, kind of keep track of these kind of, as we move from science fiction into science fact and science doing, kind of just, what are they talking about? Why is this important? Why isn't it important? How's it going to impact my life or my kid's life? Or, are we going to be mutants one day, right? Which we are already mutants. So that's kind of...
Technically, but Rise of the Planet of the Apes did end up touching on the Alzheimer's.
That's right. Yeah.
Which Caesar was a mutant.
That's right.
Because his mother was injected with this Alzheimer's cure.
I think so. Yeah, it was something in that.
And Caesar ended up getting this rapid growth of his brain that he was able to start learning and
right.
Yeah. And then
right. And it passed on genetically. And then didn't he release the canisters?
Yeah.
And then they all had, it's been a while since I saw that movie. Then they went.
It was so good though.
And then the second one, they had started their communities out in the woods and built up, and that was the true fight against, man versus
the downfall of man.
Right. Instead of just being cooperative, right? I think just leave them be, let them live there. And I think it's a fear that if we don't do something, they'll take us over because they're physically stronger already. At a place, if you think of humans in terms of animals, that we are we're pretty fragile. We don't have claws. We don't have sharp teeth.
We're just a bunch of skin bags.
With a big brain. And we do cool things. We have thumbs. And so...
And we pay taxes.
And we pay taxes, yes. We pay lots of taxes sometimes. But yeah, you have, the mutants were created. But you also had, for it to be genetically passed on, it was something that went further than just kind of a local... So, if you give someone something and it changes the genetic profile of, let's say, their brains, but in their reproductive cell lines, you don't correct it, they will pass on not the unfixed gene or not the enhanced genes. So really, it's got to be a more global kind of thing there. So we can go ahead and start to wrap up. Any last thoughts? Any favorite? I mean, we touched on, I hit Wolverine. Do you have a favorite mutant really fast as we close in? Get other people to chime in on this one.
You know what? I think one of my favorite mutants would have to be Nightcrawler. His mutation really made him get driven.
And for the non-Marvel fans, can you go ahead and give Nightcrawler's lowdown?
Nightcrawler can teleport, and he is the color of blue. He ends up looking more like a demon to most people, and he has such a kind heart for a character for being so put out by the rest of his family and friends and community. And it was so cool to see how far he ended up coming.
Yeah. And so his phenotype would be blue skin. He had a tail. Did he have horns? No.
Mm-mm.
He just had, his ears were displaced on his head, right?
I think they were just pointy.
Were they just pointy? Pointy, but they weren't where normal ears are at.
Pretty sure they are.
Okay. All right. I need to look.
We'll put that in the show notes.
An image there. You probably need an image on that one. But he had the skin, the tail, which are obvious kind of physical manifestations of some genomic change, but then he can teleport. So that's where you get into this.
I think he also had 3 fingers.
He had 3 fingers?
Yeah, I think he was like that.
Oh yeah, he did have less. He didn't have 5 digits,
unless I was just really bad at drawing.
Yeah, no. So he had some physical defects that he had. So just kind of body plane or body shape mutations that affected that. But then then his superpower was you can have folks even now born with extra digits, fused digits. There's all sorts of kind of mutations there that can happen that can cause that. You have folks that are born with a little tail, so you have kind of, and I'll look that up to confirm, but you can have some of these things, or even facial kind of features where you can have your ears can be displaced a little bit, or narrower face, or so you have these things that can actually that occur that we see. But really the kind of the push over into fantastical would be the teleportation. Right, he can do something with his molecular structure, his quantum structure, and move it from point A to point B.
Wild.
Right, and so you have this thing when you start. That's the thing when you start crossing the line. You go, well, how would this really work? You sometimes just go, it probably wouldn't work like the way you think.
I feel like we're going to have to cover teleportation at some point.
Oh, we got to talk about teleportation. Yeah.
I mean,
getting the quantum, getting qubits and
killing yourself and then reanimating yourself.
Or are you just creating a duplicate of yourself? And we're going down. I mean, we're getting down another rabbit hole, but like The Fly, right? We could talk about this, but like The Fly. I mean, that's with Jeff Goldblum.
Yep.
That was the whole thing. He had to go in, breaking down his components, then the computer would put them back together. His Mac 2E or whatever he had there on his desk, his Pentium processor did compute the little bar graph. Deet, deet, deet. It's getting the meat wrong. Something like that. Because he put the steak in at first. And the Gina Davis was in there with him?
No, I don't know. That's been a minute since I've seen that.
Yeah, we gotta watch some movies, kind of throw these in. So maybe we should do that. We should watch The Fly and then revisit maybe a couple episodes. I think next episode we're going to talk about infections. Oh, infection rate, zombies. Yes. I love zombies. Love me some. You guys know, maybe you don't know, but I love zombies. Like I do.
Wait, who are you?
Are we all done with mutants? You're satisfied for now. You got a handle on mutants. You're gonna go back, read the comics, watch the movies, reevaluate. You know where they fall and.
We're going to end up covering it again.
Probably, yeah.
It's going to end up being in another rabbit hole of something.
You know, I mean, it comes up again. I mean, we just have it.
Are zombies considered mutants?
They're not.
It's a mutation on the body.
They're not mutated, though. Oh. They are infected by a virus, bacteria.
Aren't some
fungal, but not changes like that. Yeah, I'm not going to go mutant. No, I think they're actually... There's other life forms that take over the human husk after it's been.
Joe, I think this is something you need to save for the next episode.
Maybe, yeah. Well, you can tether back in. We can get back in there really fast. But yeah, so all right. Thanks for hanging out with us.
It was a fun time.
This is the Rabbit Hole of Research. We'll see you next time.
Signing off.